Let us not forget everything that happens is by the will of Allah. It's time to unite and stand, and we will be the best amongst men. It's not time to be extreme or do the unthinkable, but to stand together as one. Into Sunnah followers streaming every day, various platforms. Trust me, you'll find a way. Sunnah followers.
She was known for having married 3 famous companions of the Prophet, namely Jafar, Abu Bakr, and Ali. She was sister to 2 of the Prophet's wives, and hers is a story of perseverance of such greatness that she was given the good news of paradise. Join Ustada lailanasheeba as she tells the story of Asma Bint Umays. Rasulullah, welcome to our series of Heroines of Islam, and mashallah, tonight we're going to do the story of one of the heroines of Islam, one of the female companions, and her name was Asma Bint Umays. Asma Bint Umays. This woman was such a great woman that men of stature did not hesitate to offer themselves in marriage to her. And it always happened immediately after whoever she was married to died. Subhanallah. And that shows how times change now. Back in the beginning of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mission, Allah sent down rights for all mankind, for humans of all genders, male, female, slaves, non-slaves, and animals even. And after Allah sent down the rights that we all have as humans, Allah even went further to speak about the actions or things that we do as humans that please him the most. And one of them is, taking care of widows, taking care of women who have no husbands, and taking care of children who have no fathers. And the companions, they took this religion seriously. So if a woman's husband was killed fighting in the way of Allah, the men would wait till after the woman completed her mourning period, and then they would just step up and start asking to marry her because they wanted the reward. They wanted the blessing of taking care of a widow or of taking care of children who had no father. Times have changed terribly, because today, if a woman says she has children, most men shy away from her. If a woman has been married more than once, if she's been married 3, 4, 5, 6 times, the men shy away from her. Well, guess what? This female companion was married several times, and the men didn't shy away from her. They were breaking down the door trying to get to her as a husband. And had she lived longer, she would have always had the men breaking down the doors to try to have her as a husband. Because not only because of the reward that Allah gives a man for doing such, but also because she was a virtuous woman. Nowadays, you tell a brother that you've been married several times, they think badly of you. I don't know why. If a woman tells you she's been married 6 times, that should tell you something, that she don't put up with trash. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. You know, these are the days of fitan. Well, Shaitan makes the good appear to be evil and the evil appear to be good. Nowadays, a woman tell you that she's only been married once, you think, oh, she's virtuous, not knowing that she's only been married once. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the only man she's been with intimately. But if a woman tell you she's been married 5 times, you think, oh, this woman got a sexual problem. No, all she had was 5 men. Whereas that person that had just one probably done been with 50. It's just one that she married. See how the times have changed. Well, tonight's story is going to be about one of the female companions. Her name is Asma Bint Umays. And let me take the screen down here, so everything down, so you can, I know a lot of you like to, you know, screenshot the PowerPoints and print them out so you can have them to share with the children and whatnot. So I'm going to take it all down so you can see. Uh-oh. And for the people on Zoom, I know all my students like to screenshot, so doing this for them, really. Oh, is this me? Is that me live? Oh, let me see. Is this me? I don't know. That's not me, is it? That might be the other class. Is that this class? No, that's the other class. I'm going to say, because look at the time on it. Okay, for the people on Zoom, I'm going to say share you to, if I can get out of this, to this. Oh, okay, yeah, this is Twitter. That was the last class. Let me refresh this page. And by the way, we are streaming simultaneously on all the major social platforms, including Twitter, as you can see here. There I am live on Twitter. Let me click on that. So the people in Zoom, y'all can see that. All right, and now I'm going to make it bigger, the screen larger, and everyone else should go to the snow and then me, okay? Let me fix this up. Always, okay? And put that, keep that there. And I think I stopped that. Let me keep that going for y'all. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on for a second. It's the Zoom people. Okay, now that's it for you guys. Okay, now let me go to everyone here. You guys should be able to see. There it is. Inshallah, you can see my PowerPoint. And it's on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me make it larger on you. It's not large on there. I can see from this thing here. Okay, full screen. All right, there's full screen. And now let's share it and go from beginning. Okay, here we go. Inshallah, everyone should be able to see. So this is one of the heroines of Islam. Her name was Asma Bint, which means daughter of Umays. Umays. Let's talk about her. Now, we've been learning in our other seerah classes that to be an immigrant back in the Prophet ﷺ's time, to migrate, to leave your land because you're not able to practice your religion without being persecuted, and to go somewhere else so you can practice. This is a great honor. We learned that, and a great privilege. But some of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ misunderstood the concept of migration. They thought that it was just the reward and virtues of migrating was just restricted to migrating from Mecca to Medina. So they assumed that the people who migrated to Abyssinia and stayed there had no reward for their migration. Again, and this is just how people are. We sometimes don't understand things. Well, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam set the record straight with this, because this bothered Asma, who was one of the female companions who migrated to Abyssinia. In fact, she was married. She was married to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's cousin, Jafar. So when she was able to meet up with the Prophet, she ran to him to ask him, was this true? She said, is it true that even though I left my home of Mecca and went to Abyssinia, I'm not getting the reward that those people who migrated to Mecca get? And the Prophet said, no, this is not true. He said, don't you know, Asma, that you completed 2 migrations, and the people that's doing all that talk only did 1. So you have an even better reward than they do, because you migrated twice to practice your religion. You migrated twice in the way of Allah. So that puts you of a higher status than they are. And I want you brothers to pay attention to this statement, because there are some men amongst us today who believe that women are ignorant and women are a lesser species than men are. Well, this refutes that. Asma was of a higher status because she did 2 migrations for the sake of Allah than those men that just did 1. And when the Prophet told her that, she was so happy, okay? Because she migrated from Mecca to Abyssinia, and then later from Abyssinia to Medina. All because of her love for Allah. And that's also when Allah sent down this verse when he said, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to immigrate to? And this is what I was telling you guys yesterday when someone asked a question about, we were talking about the qadr of Allah. Everything happens because Allah wills it to. Allah is the creator of good, and he's the creator of evil too. And he's the one that wills everything to happen, good and bad. And some people were asking about, Gaza, some people still have a hard time with why is Allah allowing that to go on? Well, I told you guys, even the people in Gaza have not suffered more than the Prophet and his companions. History is nothing but a merry-go-round. History repeats itself over and over. The people in Gaza are going through nothing more than what the Prophet and them went through. They went through genocide too. They had to leave their homes and go to 2 different places to practice their religion. So again, Allah is in control, and everything happens because he wants it to. Everybody understand that? So this is what made one of the things that made Asma so notable. She asked the Prophet, is it true what they're saying that the only people that get rewarded are those who went to Medina? And the Prophet said, no, you are on a higher level than many of them because you did 2 migrations. And so she was amongst those who went to Abyssinia. And she stayed there for all those years. But even though she and the people with her stayed for those years, they all wanted to be with the Prophet. When they heard that the Prophet had migrated to Medina and established an Islamic state there, that's when they left Abyssinia and rushed home so they could be in the presence of the messenger of Allah. But when they reached Medina, even though they were tired, they were told that the prophet and his companions were not there, because that's when they had set out for Khaybar to do the battle there. But even though these Muslims had just arrived from Abyssinia and they were tired, they still packed their stuff and went to Khaybar so they could join in and help the Muslims there. But when they arrived, it was too late. The battle was over. Khaybar had been conquered. And when the Prophet ﷺ received the news that the people of Abyssinia had come, he said, I don't know for which reason I'm more happier. I don't know if I'm happier because of the conquest of Khaybar or because my cousin Jafar has arrived. Now, Jafar, he was the husband of Asma. And you guys should know who Jafar is. Asma embraced Islam very early, along with her husband, Jafar. In fact, they had just gotten married when they both set out for Abyssinia in the way of Allah. Their new marriage did not stop them from taking this big step. Instead of staying in Mecca and enjoying their honeymoon, they struggled in the way of Allah and left to go to Abyssinia. And you guys know who Jafar was? He was the one who approached the King Negus. He was the spokesperson on behalf of the Muslims. When King Negus asked about Jesus, Jafar was the one who told him what the Quran says about Jesus. And when the Negus asked about Mary, the mother of Jesus, he was the one that recited to Negus the words of the Quran about Mary. So she, Asma, was married to Jafar, who was the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad. And they were newlyweds. Okay? So she was a righteous woman, married to one of the family members of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, just so you guys know, after the King Negus allowed the Muslims to stay in Abyssinia, Jafar and Asma stayed there. They didn't try to come back to Mecca like Sauda did and like some of the others did, okay? They stayed in Abyssinia for 15 years. For 15 years. In fact, that's where Asma had her children by him at. Okay? The Prophet kept in touch with Jafar and the rest of the people there by sending emissaries to not only teach them the new revelations as they came down, but also to check on them. So her and Jafar were there for 15 years. And when they did leave, they left when they right before the Battle of Khaybar. And when Asma left, she left with her 3 sons. She had 3 sons and she left with them. But she didn't know what was waiting for her when she arrived in Medina. Because right after her and her husband Jafar arrived in Medina, the Prophet appointed her husband, his cousin Jafar, to be one of the commanders in the Battle of Mu'tah. In fact, the Prophet told him, if Zayd ibn Haritha is killed, Jafar, you are to take over as the commander of the army. And just so you guys know, and I want y'all to write this down, this is a trivia. This was the first and only battle that Jafar took part in with the Prophet. And this was the first battle that the Muslims fought against the Romans. The Muslim army consisted of 3,000 soldiers. The Romans had 100,000 soldiers. This is the Battle of Mu'tah. And the reason that this battle occurred was because the prophet had sent a messenger to the king of Basra, inviting him to Islam. And Mukhtar talked about that in his class. This is when the prophet sent letters to the leaders of the world, inviting them to Islam. Well, the person sent with the letter to the governor of Basra was killed by an ally of the Romans. And the prophet wanted revenge. He wanted qisas for this. So that's when the prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, called upon the Muslims, to go out and seek avengement for the murder of the messenger sent. The prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, told the Muslims that if Zayd, who was the commander, was killed, then Jafar should take up as the commander. And if he was killed, then they should pick a third one. So this is the first and only battle that Jafar took part in the way of Allah with the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, needless to say, guys, Jafar was killed. He was killed during this battle. And after Jafar was killed, that's when the Muslims appointed Khalid bin Waleed to be their commander, because he had just converted to Islam and he was able to bring victory to the Muslims. But the Muslims lost 3 of their best commanders, one being Zayd and then the second being Jafar, subhanallah. And just as Jafar's performance with the King Negus was spectacular, you can imagine how spectacular he was on the battlefield. What happened was, as he was fighting against the Romans, when he realized that his horse was keeping him from being able to swing his sword freely, he got off his horse and he hit the horse so that the enemy wouldn't use it. And he rushed onto the battlefield with his sword in his hands to do one-on-one combat. And as he was fighting, he lost one hand, because with one hand, he was using the sword. And in the other hand, he was carrying the banner of Islam. And what was the flag of Islam? It wasn't like the flag of Palestine. It wasn't like the flag of Sudan. It was La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah, one nation, one people. So they cut off his hand with the banner. And when they cut that hand, he picked up the banner with the other hand, and they took off that hand too. And that's how he died. That's how he died, because he refused to drop the banner of Islam. Later, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that Allah has replaced the hands of Jafar with the wings, and he now flies around paradise with wings. And he and Hamza will be leaders over the martyrs in paradise. So that's Asma's husband. Asma was married to him, Jafar, the cousin of the Prophet. When Asma received the news that her beloved husband was killed, she was greatly hurt. Tears of pain and sadness flowed from her, and she mourned his death severely until the Prophet came to visit her. The prophet gave her 3 days to mourn the loss of her husband. And her son Abdullah tells us on the 3rd day, the prophet came and he gave their family condolences. And he said, Asma, do not cry over my brother after today, because this was the 3rd day. He said, bring the children of my brother to me. So she gathered her sons, the 3 sons she had, and brought them to him. And the prophet noticed that their hair had grown real long. You know, they had long hair. And remember, this is when the prophet was teaching us to take care of our hair, to cut out, to comb our hair, to oil our hair, brush through it, comb through it. So he saw the 3 boys and noticed how unkempt their hair was. So he said, go fetch the barber. And the barber came and he instructed the barber, to shave their hair because their hair was knotted. This is where that hadith about the knots came from. Don't let your hair grow and knot up. That's when the prophet said anyone who has hair should comb it on a regular basis, brush it on a regular basis, oil it, comb through it. Those 3 boys' hairs were in knots, like the dreadlocks you brothers like to wear. So the prophet had the barber shave their heads. This is more dalil about them dreadlocks. Y'all got to stop wearing them. They're haram. And then after having their head shaved, the prophet said, Muhammad, this one here, he looks like Abu Talib, our uncle. And then he said, and your son Abdullah looks like me, because they were all first cousins. He said, oh Allah, be the supporter of the family of Ja'far and bless Abdullah, because Abdullah looked just like the Prophet Muhammad. They were first cousins. So the Prophet made dua for Asma Bint Umays and her sons. And then after he did that, Asma said, O Messenger of Allah, my sons are now orphans. They have no father. And she began to cry. And the prophet said to her, Asma, what are you afraid of? How can you be afraid of poverty? Because I am their guardian in this world, and I will be their guardian in the hereafter. In other words, he was letting her know that he would make sure that her sons were cared for. And after he told her that, Asma devoted her time to taking care of herself and her children. Remember, the prophet taught them because they had just gotten back from Abyssinia. Remember, Asma and her sons and Ja'far had been in Abyssinia for 15 years. For those of you who don't know, dreadlocks are not new. The Abyssinians used to allow their hair to grow. The Abyssinians used to allow their hair to grow and not up. You can Google it. That was just part of the Abyssinian culture. They would let their hair grow and not up. This was the first time the prophet had seen the sons of Ja'far. And he ordered the barber to shave their heads. And that's when he said, comb through it. Comb through it. You can't comb through dreadlocks, people. Oil it and wash it. Okay? So Asma devoted her time to caring for herself and her children. She focused on them, taught them about Allah, taught them about the religion. The prophet used to check on her, and he'd check on his cousins, her sons, and would show kindness to them by way of gifts. So there's more dalil about your dreadlocks. And by the way, you'll find all of this in Bukhari and Muslim and Muwatta. Okay? It just so happened after Khaybar, the day of the Battle of Hunain came. When the Battle of Hunain came, this is when we lost another heroine of Islam, the wife of Abu Bakr. Y'all remember I did her story, Aisha, radiallahu anha's mother, Ruman. After the Battle of Hunain, which came after Mu'tah, Abu Bakr's wife, Ruman, died. And when he lost her, that's when he approached Asma, who was the widow of Jafar, and he asked her to marry him, and she agreed. And you guys know who Abu Bakr was. He was the father of Aisha, radiallahu anha. He was the second of the two in the cave. He was the first caliph after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Asma too was one of the early Muslims. She was also knowledgeable. She migrated twice for the sake of Allah. And she was the wife of Jafar, the flying martyr. So when Abu Bakr approached her for marriage, she accepted. And her and Abu Bakr were married. And she lived with him, and they were a happy couple. She knew what her rights were as a wife, and she fulfilled it. And she also knew what his rights were as a husband, because Allah had been sending down all those verses of the Quran about women's rights, Surah Nur, Surah Anisa, and all of that. Asma studied those verses and became the perfect wife for Abu Bakr, the perfect mother. She even gave him a son. She gave birth to Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, during the farewell pilgrimage. In fact, when she went into labor, Abu Bakr wanted to send her back to Medina, but the Prophet told him to let her make the major wudu and then rededicate herself after the child is born in offering the pilgrimage. So she was with Abu Bakr when they did the final pilgrimage with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And to show how good a marriage Asma had with Abu Bakr, when Abu Bakr became the caliph and was about to die, he ordered that Asma wash his body. And this is where that hadith in Bukhari comes from, that a woman can wash the body of her husband. Because when Abu Bakr died, Asma Bint Umays washed his body. He had her wash his body because, he knew he could trust her. Because he didn't want somebody to wash his body and go back and talk about how he looked. That was a big thing. You don't want people to see what injuries you got. Abu Bakr fought in all the battles with the Prophet. Plus, he was the caliph over the Muslims and fought against the Romans. He didn't want the people to see what type of injuries he sustained. So he trusted Asma Bint Umays, and she washed his body. And by the way, we talked about how Aisha radiallahu anha tells us that after her mother Ruman died, she was happy to learn that her father was marrying Asma Bint Umays, because all the women respected her, because she was one of the originals to convert to Islam. And after Abu Bakr died, Umar gave Asma a pension of 1,000 dirhams. So she would receive 1,000 dirhams every month. And guess what happened? She was such a righteous woman that right after she fulfilled her waiting period, Ali, who was the younger brother of her first husband, Ja'far. For those of you who don't know, Ali and Jafar were brothers. When after Abu Bakr died and she finished her waiting period, Ali offered to marry her, and he did. So she married Ali, and he treated her son Muhammad as if he were his own. And Asma had 2 more sons by Ali, Yahya and On. So this shows how it was, marrying a woman was a great thing to do, a widowed woman. And even if it was my brother's wife, my brother who died, his wife, Ali married her, because she was a good woman. And he wanted to take care, of his brother's children and also Abu Bakr's. And she bore him 2 sons. Asma lived with Ali as a noble woman. She fulfilled all her marital obligations. Again, they say, even Aisha, radiallahu anha, says she was a perfect wife. She took those words from the Quran about how women should be in their home, how a woman should be a great helpmate to her husband. She took that responsibility seriously. And she was there to be a good source of strength for her husband. Now, this is what makes history. This is what show how we can see how intelligent Asma Bint Umays was. This is a woman that was married to 3 great men. She was married to Jafar, the one who spoke to Negus. Then she married Abu Bakr, the first man who will enter paradise after the prophet. And then she married Ali, Jafar's brother, and the 4th man who will enter paradise after the prophet. And she had children by all these men. Well, we have this authentic hadith. One day, Muhammad, the son of Jafar, and Muhammad, her son by Abu Bakr, they were arguing with each other as to which one of them was better and which one of their fathers was the best. Ali was sitting there listening, and he looked at Asma and he said, Asma, why don't you answer the question for them? Now, a lot of people might say, why did Ali ask her that? Did Ali want to test her intelligence? Or did he just want to know whose love who of those men she really loved? Well, when the question was asked, which one was better, Jafar or Abu Bakr, listen to her answer. This is what she said. She said, to answer the question, my sons, I have never seen a young man better than Jafar. And I have never seen a middle-aged man better than Abu Bakr. So there's your answer. And when she gave this answer, the boys stopped arguing and they walked away. And Ali smiled and he said, if Jafar was the best young man, and if Abu Bakr was the best middle-aged man, he said, where does that leave me, Asma? And of course they laughed. She said, it leaves you as being the man I'm with now. And they both laughed. See how, what woman would have thought of an answer like that? That's my answer. If anyone asks me, because I've been married several times, well, I've never known a better young man than my first. I've never known a better middle-aged man than my second. And I've never known a better old man than the old man. Hello. And whoever I happen to be with, well, where does that leave us? You got the Cupid out, baby. What do we learn from her? You see how intelligent these women were. These women were not invisible. They were invincible. And these women were intelligent. So how is it that we have men today thinking that women are of less intelligence? Well, Asma, her journey from this world into the next happened to come when she received the news of the death of her son, Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr. For those of you who can remember when all the fitna broke out, her son, Muhammad, the son of Abu Bakr, he was the governor of Egypt at the time of Ali's caliphate. The rebels ended up killing him, and then they killed Ali. When the news reached Asma that she lost both her son and her husband, that's when her body began to go out on her. She went to the prayer place in her home and she made 2 voluntary rakats. And then the people began to notice that she was bleeding from her chest. And as a result of that, she lost so much blood that she died. So we don't know if it was tuberculosis. Back in those days, they didn't have the medicine that we have today. You know, but whatever it was, some say it was tuberculosis. Allah knows best. But she ended up dying. She bled to death from her chest. So that's the story of Asma, the daughter of Umays. Subhanallah, what a fortunate woman this was, to be married to 3 of the best men of this nation. Jafar, the one that could speak the words of Allah to the Negus, to cause the Negus to ignore the pleas of the Quraysh and let the Muslims live there in Abyssinia. What a great man this was. And then to be married to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who was as-Siddiq, subhanallah. And then after him and his death, to be married to Ali, who was the 4th best of this nation, subhanallah. This is something, guys, you know, a woman, those are bragging rights that any woman wishes she could brag and boast about. I know I could. I wished I can brag and boast about being married to 3 of the best.